For more on the implications, I'm joined by Christopher Palmedo. He's a clinical professor of community health and social sciences at the City University of New York, Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy. Good to have you with us on this. I mean, it's not really controversial as much as it has been in recent years. I feel like the public has gotten more and more used to it. More than half the states in the United States, it's basically legal, and the other half is sort of at some point trying to catch up. Where are we now?
Well, I think this should have happened a long time ago. As a professor of public health, I look at the effects of laws and policies on the health of populations. So from a public health perspective, the pardoning and decriminalization we're talking about really should have happened a long time ago. Outlawing cannabis came at a huge cost to society. It broke up families, drained people's finances, and it introduced all kinds of stresses to individuals, families, entire communities. So now the government's finally realizing that these laws didn't really protect us. What they did was damage and destroy the lives of generations of Americans. And we're rebuilding from that now. The states have been rebuilding it, and now finally the federal government's doing it.
The cannabis world is extremely fragmented, right? Every single state has their own specific rules, whether it's medical use or recreational use. Every single state has different regulatory issues on what can be sold, whether it's CBD, hemp-based, or cannabis-based. And then you have the THC versus non-THC situation. My point is this, don't we need, in America, one set of rules for everybody? Because if it's fragmented like this, it's still going to be chaotic.
Well, we have various rules for various other things. The 20th century United States Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis once pointed out that the 50 states are laboratories for democracy. So in other words, different states have different laws, and the industry evolves differently in different states. So as you're saying, they're all different, and they've evolved very differently, and I don't expect it'll change that much. I think the states will continue to evolve separately. Do we need to have one law? Yeah, we certainly do need to have some uniform concepts, like we shouldn't be putting people in jail for cannabis. But we've got, the different states are doing things different ways. So in California, for example, there have been dispensaries since medical cannabis was legal back in 1996. And then you've got Vermont, which is another legal state. It doesn't even have dispensaries. It's more of a cottage industry where people are more likely to grow their own, free from regulation and taxation. So, today, depending on the state, you've got dispensaries, you've got nurseries, edible companies that make baked goods, companies that produce oils, you've got producers of cartridges, cooking supplies, growing supplies. So the business is booming in all kinds of different directions. It goes on. And I think at this point, we're not going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle. It's just a matter of watching the industry evolve.
Well, I will say this. There is a significant portion of the population who don't want to see marijuana legalized. And part of the reason is it does impair people's thinking. If you're doing marijuana and you are high, you shouldn't be driving a school bus, shouldn't be driving a train, you shouldn't be operating machinery, and there's a lot of things you shouldn't be doing, like driving next to me, for example. How are we going to regulate this and make sure that people who decide to use marijuana are doing it responsibly?
Well, it's a tough question, and the different states and the federal government are trying to answer that question. We can look to alcohol as guidance for that. Arguably, it's more dangerous to drive on alcohol than it is on cannabis. Again, we can argue about one thing or the other, but the fact is it's dangerous to drive on alcohol, and we have laws governing that. And as a country, the United States tried outlawing alcohol. It was called prohibition, obviously early 20th century. It didn't work for a number of reasons, and for one major reason, it was the black market. So when you criminalize something, the black market grows, and we see that with drugs. So, I don't know that anybody has a very clear answer to your question as to how we regulate it. It's very hard. For example, it's a little harder to measure the blood alcohol. It's a little harder to measure with cannabis than it is with alcohol. Cannabis is oil soluble, and alcohol is water soluble. And so for various reasons, it's easier to detect alcohol. And so, as you're asking, it's a tough question how these are regulated.
Let me twist it around a little bit more. How does this impact crime? by legalizing marijuana, does that mean there is more crime or there is less crime in America?
Well, once you criminalize it, once you decriminalize it, technically it's not crime anymore, right? But
Well, I meant violent crime. I meant people who use the drug and do things that they should not do.
well, one of the questions is, does criminalizing actually reduce the use of the drug and the substance? And it's, the jury's out as to how much of a reduction of use it is. What we do know with a lot of drugs and other substances, especially, and also with cannabis, there are more toxic substitutes. So these things called K2 and spice, you find these on the streets when cannabis is illegal. So to answer your actual question, if you put the cannabis aside, again, back to what I was saying earlier, when you criminalize people, you're now going down a spiral. So let's say you put the father figure in jail. Now all of a sudden there's a single mom who has to raise the kids. Now there's an economic burden. There may be more crime committed because someone was put away in jail for cannabis, for example.
Christopher, I appreciate the time on this. I think one thing is for sure is that there is increasing pressure on President Biden to perhaps follow through with some sort of decriminalization, and perhaps some are expecting him to legalize marijuana use, which has been in talks for a very long time. Appreciate the insights on this, and we'll have more on this again later. Thank you.
Absolutely. Nice talking to you.